to order. We'll have the clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Newton. Councilmember Hannah. Councilmember Alleman.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Bash. Mayor Grummeyer. All present. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If you will join me in the pledge. Again, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. So we will begin the workshop with public comments. Do we have any cards?
I have one speaker card, Tamara Norman. I have no further speaker cards.
All right, thank you. So then we're going to move right into the budget workshop with the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. So my suggestion tonight is that we have a discussion with the council. Any questions you have with regard to the budget? I've gotten a few calls, but really not a lot. So I'm guessing you have questions and things you want to go over. So we go through those questions. Lisette and I are here, and the departments are here to try to answer your questions, and then maybe gathering also your ideas, and then have some just discussion around these big issues with regard to Measure R and any other potential concepts that you have. And then based on those concepts or issues, or I guess general direction, that what the staff can then do is try to come back with a more formal recommendation about next steps, depending on the consensus of the council. So that's my suggestion.
All right, perfect.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Are we just sticking to the budget or also the CIP?
The budget, the CIP is the budget. So
Okay,
yes, both.
we used to kind of talk about them separately.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just want to
CIP
be clear
is
on where our questions can be.
100%.
Thank you.
The CIP is a part of the budget. So it is one thing.
All right, perfect. So then with no formal presentation, then I guess we'll go ahead and start with questions that anyone might have. So with that, is there anyone up here that has some specific questions that they'd like to start with? I see Councilmember Newton has posties. Are you ready?
Well, I didn't want to wipe anybody else out with all of mine, but want to start? I'll start.
Yeah.
Maybe some of your questions will be other questions, and we can just start narrowing down our list.
So no particular order, okay? And some of this may be just trying to navigate through. So, guess it's just a am I going with you, Lori, or Lisette? Okay. All right, well, I'll start with you. Under general fund revenues, that on page 21, to me, the biggest hit we took was community development fees compared to last year. where this year we're projected to be $1.3 million, but our total revenue is very close to where we were last year. Am I correct in that assumption?
In terms of overall general fund revenue.
Right.
Yeah, general fund is up about $800,000 overall. So you see that we're projecting, if you look from year end,
Mm-hmm.
it's about up, you can call it 800,000, 900,000 or so, right? From 27.9 to 28.8. If you look at it back as compared to our amended budget, it's a little less. It's up about 400,000, 400,
Okay.
300,000. But yes, we're up slightly up. Yes.
All right. So then, and just a little one under revenues, was the banner program. And that was on page 18. Let's see. That's code 55291. We don't have any budget projection for 6th Street banner program this year.
I would have to get
See-
back to you. No, it's Amanda Kelly would know. She's here. Kelly would be able to explain.
Right. Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you. All right, so moving to expenses. Page 24. This is code 3210 vehicle allowance. Last year we were 29,000. We're 29,024 across the board. And I was just curious, since we also have an allowance for vehicles. No, I'm sorry. That's our vehicle allowance. If you go to 305, we have auto mileage at $1,700.
So the vehicle allowance is for
The
dir-
monthly stipend.
Yes, the
Right,
stipend for
right.
directors, and then the mileage would be for any mileage that staff incurs that doesn't have access to a city vehicle.
Okay.
So it's a reimbursement to staff that would travel on business usage. But not every employee has a stipend.
But don't we have the availability to use city vehicles?
Yes, we do.
And this is just for their own personal vehicle then?
Yes, so this is, for example, if the vehicles are not available or they're traveling, to different cities, depending on what's available, and it would be the reimbursement to the employee on using their personal vehicle.
So go to the one above, the conference and meetings. We projected last year to end at 125,000. This year, the budget request is approximately 70,000 greater, 191,000. And I guess overall, it's going to be, looking at different areas. So just a little concerned with that increase for conferences and meetings at that amount.
Yeah, and I can speak to that. So, as part of our investment in human capital, we have improved the allowances here for sending our staff to training. And I think I've shared with the council previously that in the past, the city has not had an adequate budget to send our staff to their discipline specific trainings. So we have improved the budget here for that so that we can make sure that we're developing our team. So that is an investment, but it comes with having, nearly 100 or 80 or so full-time people. So it's important we do that. And every department has specifically budgeted for their people to go to their things. And so, and that's at my direction, because again, we've said we want to invest in these people that work here. I can tell you I was concerned, and I know you shared this concern when you hired me to come here, and we have staff who literally have never been to their discipline specific training ever. And so they've never gotten out to see how their professions are. So we really have to invest in those people. And if you look at it on a per capita basis, it's not very much per employee for a whole year, but it's just part of having the team in place to be able to deliver their services.
I agree with you on the philosophy. I'm just kind of looking at it, just numbers in this case. So moving to page 160, non-departmental summary. This one's approximate an overall jump of $900,000. And then I went through and just broke down all the increases that we have with it. I know a lot of it's salaries. I know a lot of it's medical insurance and things like that. But I think just looking at that overall amount could there possibly be savings in non-departmental accounts?
So I think you've identified some of the challenges here. The other one I'll note for you is toward the bottom of page 161, 42,200 liability insurance is up just about 50% to 758, reflecting, I think I told you, the worst insurance market since the 70s. So our liability costs are much higher. I'm going to say that if we're going to make reductions, there's probably not substantive reductions to be made here. We would want to look at a program by program basis. That's probably the better place to go. Because most of this, I mean, medical insurance for retirees, again, we're talking about that more globally, right? We're trying to solve for that. The liability number is the number. There's not substantive change here. The UAL is the UAL for the safety plan that's closed. One day that will go away, but that's not in the foreseeable future.
And I know we have to work on that with
Correct.
retiree.
Correct. I mean, the one thing that could happen here, I will note, 3471 is the pension trust contribution for the PARS pension trust. That's really a philosophical question for you. I can argue either side of that. That's a policy choice. But the pension, I believe we stand right about 80% funded. Is that the right number?
Yes.
Okay. So your CalPERS plan is at 80%. In my professional opinion, a contribution to the pre-funding is not essential. It is a nice to do, but it is not essential. I understand why the council's committed to that, and I certainly support it. I'm not saying that, but I do want to say that is one where you could defer that for a year. The pension is funded, so.
We worked pretty hard to get to that point, and hoping we got to the point where it was at a balance where we didn't have to contribute anymore. That was the overall goal on that. So I'm kind of leaving that one in there for now, but certainly understood.
And if I can just add one more commentary on that, prepaying a PERS liability is a little like, paying down a credit card that your ex-wife still charges on. It's a little like that, because at the end of the day, we don't control what CalPERS does, right? With their investments, with their earnings, with their assumptions, with their actuarials. So we can prepay and through the form of a pension liability trust or paying down UAL bases, but that next year, another UAL bases can pop back up based on what CalPERS does. So it's very challenging to try to manage that. So,
But we're in a good position today.
We are in a very good position today, even absent this pre-funding. And keep in mind, once you put this money in that PARS trust, it's an irrevocable trust. It's tied up forever for those things. Even if the pension plan moves to 105% funded, that money is locked in a lockbox for those purposes that have been allocated for that fund. So it's just, it's something to think about on balance.
And then right below it, the other contractual services, that's an increase of approximately $250,000. That's Fund 34100, same page.
Yeah, and Lisette, maybe you can go through that. I think that's where we have some of our fee studies budgeted.
Yes, we do have our development impact fee study to be scheduled for next year, as well as our cost allocation plan and our fee study, and in addition to the development impact fee study. We also have one of the biggest items in there is the placeholder for the whether the what do you call it, to fully implement the salary compensation that was done for the rest of the employees that were not
The
done
rest
in
of the
December.
class and comp.
Yes,
And all of that. So as a placeholder, we don't know the hard cost yet,
no.
which means this can move up or down.
I don't think we're going to propose to you in the context of labor negotiations anything that would move up from here.
What I wanted to hear there. Okay, so let me get to a portion of the Measure R part. I think at the last meeting, I made my opinion pretty clear where my stand was on public safety. And then going over this, what's in front of us tonight on parks, facilities, and maintenance, I'm still not 100% clear on why the Measure R committee rejected this. Okay, this ask. And I know this will always come out the wrong way. It's in the past, all facilities contractual and parks always came out of general fund and not Measure R. Somehow during the leanest years, we always got the grass mowed, okay? But we really didn't take real good care of our parks. And so I'm a little torn on that as far as why it was rejected, but what actually should be in general fund or out of facilities or out of parks budget. So on page, I was kind of going through general fund. This was on page 267, water charges, electricity charges, and trying to tie that back into the water charges, electricity charges for facilities and maintenance. And so in all these categories, we're breaking water, electrical individually, like total general fund on page 267, water charges $330,000, and then electricity $45,000. So where's that all spread?
So we do have, each year we have staff verify for the electricity. We do have staff to go out and verify at every single meter at each location. And they verify that, yes, this is for the right building and the right location. So this is for all our facilities that the city owns.
Okay. So if you go to page 271, and this is facilities and maintenance, just angles, we had on water and electricity, subsection 100.20, water's just a little less, but electricity, last year we projected 173,000, this year's 50,000. So how did we go? Where's it being moved to? I mean, how could we save $120,000 in electricity? It went somewhere.
We're keeping here Ingalls separate from the
Okay.
rest of the building due to the completion of the pole barn.
So
So
if you look at page 275, so facilities got split into two divisions. So to add on to what Lissette's saying, so for you're seeing Ingalls is 271.
Okay, so that where I highlighted electricity at 123.
Yeah, so it was previously combined in a single division.
Okay.
They've split it out into two separate divisions, Ingalls and all other facilities management, just for better management and tracking for the department. So it
And
was
so
all in
that
it was all in one, now it's split. So it was 173, for example, for electricity for both divisions. Now you've got 50 in one place and 123 in the other place.
and that's including the barn.
yes, this
Even though
this would
We don't know what the cost of that is, so we're projecting that.
yes.
Okay.
Can I ask a question right quick, Greg?
Absolutely. Yeah, of course.
On this facilities, is that, everything up at Ingalls Park, that Nellie Weaver Hall and both arenas and
Yes, it would be the entire Ingalls Event Center.
the memorial and everything else? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Just so I can keep Chad in the mix. On 283, Public Works, this is just inspection, contractual services, $40,000. Last year we spent 16 on contractual services for inspections. Don't we get 100% reimbursable on this?
Try to avoid it, try to hide. So our inspection services is what we budget for all our types of services, whether it's for out and doing all the different projects, water, sewer, storm drain. Storm drain, we do get reimbursement from flood control directly for each project.
Okay.
And traditionally, we hadn't been charging against that as part of the inspection services, but now we are, and I'm actually doing it with all projects where I'm including inspection services for CIP directly related. But the inspection you're seeing there, a lot of that's related to, in that particular line item, is related to all the encroachment permits we deal with. That's not funded. That does come out of basically general fund time and expenditure for doing Edison, gas company, private improvements. So there is funding that comes from general fund to support a part of the inspection services that we do as a whole as a department. But some of it's covered by water because they do water related work that we do, and a little bit of sewer maintenance water. So it's divided amongst multiple funds for the total inspection as far as to cover the inspectors.
Good. Now, I know it's not a great amount, but let's say on an encroachment permit, shouldn't that cost of that permit include the cost of inspection?
It does, but there's a difference in the revenue comes in one place, the expenditure occurs in another. So this is identifying the expenditure.
Okay.
The revenue is a different location as far as where that comes in.
Revenues.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And this is just jumping back to facilities. And this is just an overall comment. This is on page 11 of facilities improvements.
11 of the book?
Yeah. Kind of. I'm sorry, it's under facility improvements.
Under the CIP book.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm skipping a lot of stuff because I want to share with everybody. Just as an observation that just looking at prior years and then this prior years being 4,800,000, this year 4,200,000. 16 of these projects are carryovers, and 11 of these projects are new projects. And I think biggest concern is, even though it's long range and it's going out 5 years and looking at that, it's like, I don't want, like, we're not trying to place a burden on, keep adding all these new projects. So 16, like I said, are carryover, and then we're putting in another 11 on top of that.
I appreciate that, Councilmember Newton. And actually today, we had a conversation among staff about that very issue, about the number of things we're doing. So we may come back in a final CIP at your next meeting and look at dialing back or pushing out some of these projects. I'm really asking the team to see what we're capable of doing. We do have some new staff that are going to be able to help us execute on some of this. So that may be help to move the load, but I am sensitive to that too and appreciate your concern because I share it, right? We don't want to bite off more than we can chew. It'd be better to just plan for the
Yeah.
future than say we're going to do it this year if we really can't. I think that's what I hear you saying.
I used to work for this jerk, and I'd always tell him to go, I can be in 2 places at once. Don't have a problem with that. I can't be in 3. And this is kind of how I look at that. So if you go to page 65, this is on park improvements. It's kind of the same thing. We have 7 carryover projects and then 7 new projects. And it's
Well, to
kind of
clarify,
the same.
yeah, to clarify though, for next year, we actually only have 4. We have 3, we have 1 new project next year for 23-24. There are 3 projects that are carrying over.
Actually, all of
Total
them,
spread out over
yeah.
the 5
Yes,
years.
but not in
Right.
the first year.
Correct.
Yeah, we actually don't have any new projects next year. It's all carryover. We're going to complete the 4.
And then that's why we have a reduction of $1.4 million. We're almost cutting that budget in half. I was just looking at overall total. I think for now, I'm going to let this one sit, I think. Oh, well, maybe not. This is on the animal shelter. And this is page 105. And it's just more of a question. This is $235,000 for a clarifier for this year. I look at the animal shelter as not being that old of a building, and I want somebody to explain to me why in the life did we not have a clarifier installed when we constructed that originally, because that requirement would have been always there.
We didn't have the money. That's what the problem was. There was a whole bunch of things inside the building because we wanted to get the building done. I was on Park and Rec then. We just didn't have the money at that point. That's what happened. But we talked about that, and so when I saw that miss, I thought, oh, finally, with 10 years, 12 years, 13 years later, we finally got it. But that's what it was. There were actually several
I know we
things.
played fast and loose in the past with stuff like that, but I mean, it's so backwards that.
Well, that was a whole different regime.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Not-
But I remember that specifically because when I saw it in here, I went, wow, it only took a decade.
We're finally going to get indoor plumbing, huh? I think it was 105. Yeah.
Just a point. You know what? My numbers don't seem to line up with yours. Page 105?
Yeah.
Back behind the CIP
Capital
tab.
improvement. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, the renumbering starts behind the CIP
Gotcha.
tab.
Okay. I'm sitting here going, where the hell is it?
Mayor, that's all I have for right now. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anybody else have questions or items they would like to review with staff? Okay, Berwin?
Couple of them. Sorry. That's all right. One of them's over here on page 43, the under capital improvement fleet maintenance, the Black Widow arena ground working implement. Probably Michelle's. Amanda, there you are, okay. So, have we already wore the Kaiser out? The other implement? Yeah, I watched the video on it last night because I'd never heard of it, and I was in there when we bought the Kaiser. But this will work. I mean, we're keep the ground level and to a degree of depth where they get good traction. Everybody will get good traction. Okay, all right, thank you. Let's see. This would probably be for whoever's in charge of the animal keeping, agriculture farm. What is the two fees on in-town home occupation applicants? Agriculture farm, is that a permit or something you have to get? Animal keeping, you have to get a permit for that now? Or that's page 26.
Those are our business license fees, our processing fees for when they come in to get their business license.
Oh, you mean like a boarding stable or
Yeah, so if
something like that?
yes, so
Okay.
if someone has a business and is coming in to get their business license from the city.
Because I didn't know if they'd started charging to keep an animal on the property, but what's the agriculture farm deal? Do you have to have a permit to farm, or
Yes,
that for the little gardens you were talking about?
yes.
Yes, I actually,
Wasn't here when y'all did all
Yeah.
that, so I don't know what.
so I actually have one for my farm. So basically a home-based business, but you're operating the farm. So you pay the business licensing fee for the farm.
Okay, all right, that makes sense, and I didn't know.
Yeah, if I can add, Councilmember Hannah, I don't think those are new fees, correct? No, they're very old, actually. The business license fees are very, very, very old fees. Been around a long time.
Yeah, but I didn't realize that that's what it was now compared to back then. I know they used to have a ranch license a long time ago. I think they quit using them. One more small item. On page 176. Have we always paid the crossing guards, or did we split it with the school district?
The crossing guards we have always split with the district.
Are we still doing that?
Yes.
Thanks. That's all I have right now.
All right, next, Catherine?
Okay, a few questions. On page 271 of the budget, this is the Ingalls Event Center for vehicle replacement charges. Some of these are going to be a little nitpickier in the weeds, but the number for the vehicle replacement charges went down quite a bit. Do we think that's a reasonable number? Is that because we've replaced other vehicles? We don't expect that there will be much maintenance needed as in years past. I'm at the very bottom, the
Of 271.
271, yes,
I'm on the wrong
vehicle
page.
replacement charges.
Again, that might be, remember, we're creating 2 separate divisions from facilities, and we're creating
Okay,
facilities
so
and
some of
Ingalls
those
event.
maybe have been moved to the other facilities
Yeah,
maintenance.
it
Okay.
might be. You'll see a lot of things that have been split between. So yeah, you see those when there are a lot of things look like they're down. It's
Okay,
because they're
I
getting
see it.
split
So then
between.
it's 40 plus 23, so it's about the same, a little bit less. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
And then on page 239, let me go back. For special events, I was looking at salaries, right? So staff time that's used for these special events. And the numbers seemed very low. Is staff time being accounted for somewhere else?
So for the special events, we only allocate part-time salaries. Yeah, and overtime.
So yeah, so you're not seeing the full-time team allocated here. You're seeing the additional costs for part-time and overtime related to these stuff. So you're effectively hard costs, not the soft costs for the
Okay,
community services
so this
team.
would only, so for example, I'll just take the first one, right? Or maybe I'll do Parade of Lights. So for Parade of Lights, that part-time, is that just then for the day, the event that day, or
Set up also,
Okay.
set up, tear down, etc. But it won't
it's
include
actually
Michelle.
hands-on part-time people who are working the event?
Correct.
On whatever scale that is. Okay, so it's not taking, so none of the, that was my question. I'm like,
Right, so
I
you're
know
not
we're spending
seeing
a lot more
Michelle,
time on these
Alejandra,
events.
Tiffany, Anna, Robin, the whole crew. You're not seeing them there, or any of the facilities and maintenance staff that also work these events. So this just the hard cost for part time and overtime.
okay. And then on 272. So, okay, so because my other question was with this one, right? We have facilities and maintenance staff for Ingalls Event Center, but I know community services staff. So that the time that they're spending on Ingalls related items is just rolled into their general duties under their budget.
So under the organization that the council approved a couple of years ago, the responsibility for Ingalls Event Center is under the facilities and maintenance department. So where you have community services involved is if there's a special event, but they're not the ones administering or generally operating any of the facilities up in Ingalls. So yes, so if it's Parade of Lights, for example, and Nellie River Hall is being used in the parking lots, and that time is not here.
Okay.
That's in Michelle and the community services budget.
Okay. On 311 for the gas tax, the salaries went up quite a bit under subtotal salaries and benefits compared to prior years. I just wanted some context for that.
Is this correcting allocations, Chad? Okay, so this, you may recall, one of the things that we are in the process of correcting is to properly allocate public works staff across the divisions. So in the past, a higher proportion of their salary had been allocated to other funds, and we are over time moving them back to an allocation that we feel is better represents how they're actually charging their time. So that's what you're seeing here. And you'll see this also on the general fund side. You'll see additional staff costs in there as they're coming out of other funds where, again, we're better allocating more accurately.
Okay. Well, and that's good,
Yeah.
right? Because we want to make sure that the billing is going where it should go. And then on 325, I really appreciate the authorized position list so we can see any changes and where we were. I know I have some old copies of old budgets that this used to be in that I had gotten from Andy when we were looking at things a year ago. And then I think there is just one new position being added and was just looking for some context on that one. It's on page 325. It is, if I can follow the line correctly, the public works maintenance worker.
Correct. So this is a actually, I think it's a water Public Works, yes. Oh, yes. It's still called Public Works Maintenance Worker here. We'll correct that to Utility Worker. So you may recall that as part of our ongoing staffing challenge with regard to utility workers, we have a plan to increase the staff there so that we can decrease our contract services and our call outs, if you will, that we have to pay contractors. So this is that one additional position that we had discussed with the council previously.
Okay, so it should
this
be a
is-
different title then? You said
It's
utility
actually,
worker?
these are
or it is
utility
correct?
workers. Yeah,
Okay.
it's just a correction we need to make to the schedule. But this is primarily water and sewer.
Okay.
There's a very small portion of this person in the general fund. So yes, this is the only one new position that's in this budget, as I mentioned, I think at the last hearing. So no other full-time staff at all.
Okay, perfect. And then the fee schedule? This is the one we just adopted? Okay. Just want to check. That's what I thought. All right. That's all my questions for now. Thank you.
Few. First off, I'm pretty happy with the budget actually. But the but is that we're doing the new dance with Lori, so I hope you'll understand. We come from an era when we could play as much as we get to play. I'm also the son of an accountant, so forgive me. All right. So if you go to page 190, you'll see the general fund, Norco Animal Rescue Team NART, 42100. Unless I'm confused, there's a vehicle operation and maintenance, $3,000, and then there's a vehicle replacement charge is $11,500, and then the subtotal is $11,500. There's a few of those, so I'm going to leave it up to you, and it's not a big deal. It's just that whole thing of look for a penny if you're a penny off. So forgive me.
If I may, Councilmember, for that very much, it's truly appreciated, truly. If I can mention, I think
Not a criticism.
No. This is one of the problems with our spreadsheet method. So I think I mentioned this to you that we have this spreadsheet method that involves quite a few linked spreadsheets to generate the end product here. So Lisette and I lose sleep over this every night, right, Lisette? So this is the last year of the spreadsheet method. We are migrating to using our financial system. So that'll be a big project for finance and technology and IT and HR going into the summer. So this is an outflow of that we need to fix. So those things are appreciated. And if you see anything like that, please let us know.
And again, it's not a criticism. And some of these things, Lisette, I went over with you already, but I'm just going to touch on them. Page 161, General Fund Administration, 34100, contractual services, 439,079. What was? Describe that.
The non-departmental, correct? At the page around 161, page 161.
It's page 161, and it's contractual services.
So one of the biggest items in there is our development and impact fee study, our cost allocation, and our fee study that we need to complete next year.
Okay, great.
And it also has the implementation for the salary and comp.
All right, thank you. And then on the same page, 3,300, conferences and meetings. Lori, you're absolutely right. Part of the reason you were hired was because we wanted to do. I'm having a little heartburn over the cost of some of these things. I look through the departments. It's expensive, but a deal's a deal. So just so you know, I'm kind of like that, but I'm going to go along with it because I understand we asked for it. Also along the way, dues, memberships, and subscriptions. That's in a lot of departments. She described it to me, but and I'm going to kind of not think about that one, but I get a little nervous because the numbers are all over the place, and it just makes me just a little bit nervous. I'm going to try to go through these fast. Again, we're doing this dance, Lori, so I hope you understand. Okay, you already answered that one. Actually, Greg got to a lot of it. Riverside County Sheriff's Department, I was a little confused. Page 177, 34100, contractual services. I'm just confused. 205,400. over and above the law enforcement contract? What is that?
I'm sorry, where are we?
Page 177,
177.
100 contractual services. We have the law enforcement contract, which is 6833 500, and just above it says contractual services 2005 400. Just
Yeah, that's other
curious.
services, not really, so that's like flock cameras. Nicole, do you want to come up and speak to that?
Ah,
Do you have
okay.
your book? Nicole Hooknick is our secretary in the police department, and she did her first budget in the PD this year. So that was awesome. It's probably in your notebook. Nicole, did you bring your? It's not in that book. Welcome, Nicole. Thanks for being here.
Okay. I just didn't know what it was, but I'm total.
And it is up because we are doing that, completing that flock ARPR network.
Which I'm
So,
100% in support
That's
of.
in there.
So thank you. Yeah, I just
job.
didn't know what it was. All right, now I'm gonna get run out of town on a rail on this one because I'm very much in support of, on page 222, pickleball. We haven't charged, well, 1,700. I thought it was a lot more than that. To set up the pickleball class. Is that just for this year's budget, Michelle? Yeah, 222, as in the Room 222 television series. I only did 2 of them. No.
That's our class revenue related to pickleball classes.
Yeah, okay. No, that's what I meant. And it just seems inexpensive.
It is very inexpensive.
All right. And
It's
then
a deal. You should sign up.
I know, but then I look at Rainbow Express, $41,000. Just a ton of classes. Okay.
Correct.
It just seems, I don't know, low. Okay, one of the things that I noticed is that there's a lot of special departments, and what Lisette explained to me is that it varies from department to department, but that's all over the place. Like page 271, Ingalls Event Center, special departments is $4,000, or someplace where it's much more than that. So I wish we could kind of have more of a breakdown of what that means.
We could get that to you. Basically, it's unique to each department, what's being charged there. For example, in my department, the special department, I have sort of one-time costs or items that are really not financed, but we're responsible for.
Right.
So in ours, we budget there for the water, the coffee filters, and supplies for all of City Hall. So that's in ours. So they're like very unique items that are for each department. But we could, I could get staff to get you the details.
Yeah, just generally speaking, Andy used to call this the slush fund. So, and then the other thing too is that building and ground maintenance, it just seems all over the place in different departments. I'm hoping it's accurate. There's some places where it's like $200, and I'm not exactly sure if that's because we're crossing it's like now we have Michelle's department and we have your department. And so one of the things I did clarify today with Lisette is that I don't know how we can do this, but it's very difficult to follow. And she says there's a formula and there's a way to do it, but it's very hard to follow salaries because a little bit goes here and a little bit goes there. And I guess next year you have to sort of do that over again. Is that right? Explain that again. So I just had trouble finding out what everybody's getting paid.
So one of the main, like Lori had said about public works staff, is getting them to allocate their salaries to where they're more closely represent where they're working at.
If I can ask a question, Councilmember Bass, what is it? Help me understand what you're looking to solve for. Are you looking to understand the salaries and benefits like by position?
Yeah, and that's, I
Okay.
know that some people go, they're in the sewer fund sometimes they're in the
Correct.
water fund. I just wish there was some way that I could kind of see how that's all
How the
planned.
totals are?
Yeah, just how and I know
We
the
might be
totals
able to
are in
do
there.
that. I don't know that we can do that in the spreadsheet way, but there might be a way for us to do that. We can redact names and just have the positions with their total salary and benefits. That might be something we can do. I just don't know the capabilities. I know we do that for state controller, right, Lisette, and in arrears.
Well,
So,
and as part of the budget, we do have a spreadsheet that we could provide and just, redact all the names that has a percentage of where they're allocated.
Oh, I'd love that.
So that,
Just so I
and,
know.
and it also breaks it down by salary amounts and benefits.
Okay.
It's not something we include here.
yeah, because it's
what
on the
makes-
back
it's the
end.
back end of what this results of.
I just like to know. I mean, it's not that important, but
Okay.
it's important. So, CIP page 18, the project description, it includes the Scout House, to repaint. One of the things that I want us maybe to think about is the Scout House is seen better days. It's, the, there's more termites than wood. And so maybe, there's a couple of places where we have projects that we're including the Scout House. Replacing flooring at the Scout House. I know it needs it, but one of the things that we gave that money to the company that was looking at that whole area. I feel like we didn't get anything, but I really, really do believe at some point we need to look at that entire area. I know this year is very difficult because you got a full plate, but I think the Scout House, I think some of the things we've talked about, because that is the entrance into Norco, and somehow I'd like to do something with that.
If I may on that, Mayor
yes.
Pro Tem, so there is a project in the Measure R budget to do a parks facilities master plan review to look at all those facilities across the
Yes.
city. What are the current needs? What's the long-term plan? I know we've talked about potentially, is there an opportunity to relocate some of those facilities somewhere else and free up that Hamner property for, some other adaptive reuse? Like, it's not going to get into that, but we are going to look at what are our facilities, what are their conditions, what are the needs in the community right now for the facilities, and go from there. So, I think so I think we're getting to that
No,
point.
I think we are too. I just saw that you're putting money into the Scout House, and I love the Scout House. Don't get me wrong, but I was a Boy Scout in that Scout House.
Yeah, at some point it's reached the end of its useful life, as they say. At some point,
Okay.
fair enough.
And that, can I interrupt you, Kevin,
yeah.
just to say something? And that master plan is on the schedule for this fiscal year.
Yeah, it was actually for this year. We've had one failed bid. Michelle's been working hard to get new bids. I think she's getting some new, not bids, proposals. We had one failed round. We've been back out, and I think we're receiving some proposals this
Okay, good.
time. There's a placeholder dollar amount in Measure R. I'll be honest, I think it's low. I think it'll come in higher than that, but that is the plan to try to get that project maybe awarded before the end of the fiscal year, maybe. Oh, okay. So no, it'll be next fiscal year.
Okay, good to know, because I know when we've had discussions about what we think should happen, this was what that came from, is
Correct.
let's take a look so we can have a long-term vision instead of kind of fixing this or fixing that. If we want to redo a park or, some of our areas that haven't been touched for a long time, we want to have that vision so that we're not, fixing something and then going back and tearing it down or what have you.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you just said, Kathleen. Page 31, the arena lighting. I so wish we could do that this year. I think that's a really important project, but I know that we can't. Again, page 34, we list the Scout House for the analog security panels. Again, that's along what I was talking about before. The emergency generator, which is next year. I really wish we could do that this year. I know we can't, but last year, as the year before when we had the heat wave, that's our cooling center. And I think that we may possibly have a lot of brownouts happening. So that's for me, a real critical project.
And if I may add to that too, Mayor Pro Tem, so you'll notice on the CIP pages, staff has done a prioritization level in their professional judgment. So like on that senior center generator, that is considered the very high priority.
Yes.
Yes.
I don't understand why you would want to replace a Champ forklift. We can't get more rubber bands. On the other hand, the water truck, yeah, I get what they're saying, but the water truck, but it's not one of those things. And then, Matt, your information technology improvements. I am so excited about every friggin' thing on that list. I can't even tell you. If I could, I wish we could get it all done tomorrow. I go back to the days, if you remember, when we had the cans and the string, and we would talk back and forth like that. And then finally, I'm sorry it took so much time, but again, Lori, we just don't know each other yet. I just want to make some observations. The reason that we have such a surplus, and I said this the other time, is because the majority of this council and the current council dug out of a major hole. And that is why we had the reserve. So all of this money, whether it's in Measure R or whether it's in wherever it's at, we're not going to misspend it. We're very, very, and the proof in the pudding is look at all the money we have in the bank. I remember when we were truly worried about going bankrupt. Berwin was there, Greg was there, Robin was on the periphery watching. Second, in this budget, one of the things that we have to account for is inflation. It is astonishing what things are costing. And so the cost of a road that's gone up is just unbelievable. So it's sometimes not a matter of, well, my own budget, I got to cut. Well, that means we don't do a street. That means we don't have that's 2 less baseball teams. That's maybe 1 deputy less. Those are the kind of things that we now look at cutting. Okay, maybe we cut a water truck, do it next year. But the reality is that's such a minimal amount of money. And part of the reason that we built the surplus and passed Measure R was so that in times like this, which we anticipated, we would have money. The other thing that I was shocked at, and I went back and looked through my old budgets, is the cost of insurance. Lori, you were absolutely right. Insurance has just gone nuts. Retiree medical is crazy. In terms of PERS, I'm kind of with you, Greg, on deferring pension for a year. I can, we have to remember that Andy Okoro was kind of the pioneer in all that. He was the one that began to build that fund. There are cities, and it's because of term limits, because council people don't know, and staffs come and go. They're totally behind the 8 ball on these pension funds. And I can remember I would bring Andy into WRCOG, and Andy would talk about, folks, you got to get on board. I mean, there are still council people who are going, wow, we have a deficit. And then the other thing that I do have a concern about fire. I was talking to the chief over there. One of the things we're going to be looking at next year is apparently a 72 to 66 hour, which means our cost for fire insurance, on fire service is going to be going up. That's a grave concern. The other thing I anticipate is this thing they want to put on the ballot, which would totally change how cities run. I have great concerns about that. That said, I'm still not worried about the increase in this budget because we have to get done with the general plan. We have to do that. The other thing about PERS, which, and I'm talking out of turn, I can remember Andy sitting there when the PERS folks would come and talk. I won't say who it was, but the only time I ever heard Andy laugh, and the only time, and he would sit next to me and he would just laugh, go, they're not going to have any money. They're not going to have any money. They're nuts. And Andy never talked that way. Fire, building. And then finally, at the crux of all of this, just to remind everybody, and I know my colleagues all know this, and this is really for the people, and staff knows this, Norco has a fiscal imbalance. We always have. The truth of the matter is we're a butterfly with iron wings. We shouldn't fly, but we do. A mile of road, whether you have 10 houses or 50 houses on a street, is still going to cost you $1 million. And the reality is that my most happy number in all of this is the $11 million in sales tax revenue. Greg, what did we have? 2.5 million at one point we were making in a year, 3 million, something crazy like that. 3 million, I mean, we were making nothing. And because of the diversification of income, we now offset the fact that, and no offense to anybody, property owners do not begin to pay for this lifestyle. They do not pay for it. What happens is you have a staff, you have council people, and you have businesses that have come here, and the whole plan was to come stay and play, leave your money, and leave. That was the whole thing. And so I just want to remind people that that is the challenge of this council, future councils, the fiscal imbalance. As long as we're fighting for this lifestyle, the large lots do not generate the amount of money necessary to keep this city. When the city started, and I was here, the whole deal was people said, gee, big lots, don't care about the roads, the water sucks, there's no sewer system, we flood, but gosh, look where we get to live. Now we have people that want the lifestyle, want the large lots, want the trails, want the police, want the fire, want all those things that we didn't have when we started as a city. But now they want both. And so that's the challenge that we have. So it's not, I mean, I totally understand when people say, I've got to cut back. It's getting harder and harder to cut back as costs escalate. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there, and we'll talk about Measure R in a minute. And Madam Mayor, thank you so much for letting me go on. Again, normally, as you know, I usually go through the budget more closely directly with the city manager, but this time, just because you're so new, I just wanted people to know that, you know what, we're paying attention.
Right, thank you. So I have a few questions. Mine are probably going to just be a little bit more general in nature. So on page 23 is the general fund kind of expenditures by division. And so just going through that and looking for where are some really big changes and making sure that I understand, you know, what those changes are. So just starting with line 702, and it's a decrease of over $200,000. So was that moved somewhere else?
No, that was Andy retiring.
Oh, okay. Very good. And then the next one, in non-departmental, and I know we've touched on this a little bit, but a general increase. And again, I'm going from projected year end to the budget request, the $900,000. So that's just across the board, all of those.
It was the items we talked about, and also one item we haven't talked about is we're bringing the utility billing assistance program is also part of that increase.
Okay, perfect.
Comment on that. So the last couple of years we used ARPA, I believe, for utility billing assistance. And as you know, we cannot use water funds for that. So
Right.
it has to come from the general fund. Is it $200,000 we have in there for that?
We currently is, I believe, 200,000, 250.
250 in
Yes.
in 23, 24?
Yes.
Okay, so that's 250 in there. That is a number that we could obviously adjust up or down,
Mm-hmm.
but that's the number we're using right now.
Okay. And do we know approximately what that little piece of the pie has been or will be on average? Like, have we recovered from the COVID kind of assistance? Have people kind of leveled out, or?
We have lowered it to like 125, you know, hoping that that's where it's at now, since
Mhm.
there's no more assistance for that. And people are going back to work and you know, we have to shut off people now, so
Right.
that doesn't increase it. So we're hoping to stay there and then, you know, see at mid-year where we're at.
Right. Okay. Perfect. See. And I think, again, that we've kind of answered it, but maybe not. So line 733, there's been a decrease in park maintenance. Was that shifted somewhere else?
Yeah, that's reflecting the shift to Measure R.
Okay. And then under Ingalls Park or Ingalls Event Center, that decreases the split. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
And you'll see it right below at 738.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then the decrease in building and safety on line 752.
I believe, and Alma can correct me, I believe that is reflective of moving away from the contract services and looking to fill our position for building official. So we're not going to need our contract anymore, which have been higher. So we're coming into just the staffing model. Alma, is that correct? Yeah, she's
Yeah,
saying
just
yes.
on page.
Division
23,
25752. Let's look at, we can turn there. Well, it's Division 752. And she's looking at page 23, but I'm looking
But-
for what community
Yeah.
development,
Oh, yeah.
building. Yeah, so if you look on page 209, Mayor, and you will see salaries are up a little, but salaries are up about 150,000. You'll see salary and benefits, but contracts are down nearly $400,000.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the other thing also, until one of the things that Lori and I talked about, until the second phase of Palomino gets under construction, we won't be putting in because we had a third party do the inspections.
Right.
So until that comes to to begin, the inspections are required. Then we'll ask for the allowances for that. So that was not put in for this budget.
That's really
Okay.
important. So we have not budgeted for that revenue or that expenditure related to that next phase of that project. If that comes across and gets green lighted, then we'll move that. We'll come back to you for a budget amendment for both.
But this is something that's paid by the developer. And
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then just kind of an overall comment. So looking at the changes from the projected year end to what's been requested and not taking into consideration public safety at all in what I've done, it looks like the budget is up approximately $1.5 million. Again, not taking into consideration public safety. Does that sound correct to you?
Yeah, the main is in the non-departmental other than fire and safety.
All right. Very good. So I think that's all the questions that I had right now. Any other questions, Catherine?
I just wanted, because I've heard the water truck mentioned also by residents, Lori, could you just clarify our asset replacement fund and how that works and where the funds would come from? Because some of our assets, we're already budgeting money for them to be replaced, correct?
Yes. So if you look at the CIP at that page, essentially what we do on a yearly basis is we set aside funds for fleet replacement. So every division you'll see a fleet maintenance charge or a fleet replacement charge. That money goes into a separate fund that's held for these replacements. So if you look at the water truck project, we are on page 49 of the CIP, and you'll see under other sources, you'll see the $100,000 is coming from another source. That is the vehicle replacement fund. So Amanda can speak to the need for this water truck, but it is used daily. They are now at the point where they can't get parts for the water truck. So while it's not a very interesting thing for people to buy, it is desperately needed to keep the Ingalls Event Center in proper maintenance order. But we can certainly punt on it if the council wants to, but understand that may mean downtime at Ingalls, number one. But then also it doesn't help the general fund. There's
Right.
no savings here for the general fund if we punt on this.
Right, because the money's already in that fund. It's been
Correct.
put away each year as a portion. So that's what I just wanted to clarify as well, just so that people understand that's already baked into the budget each year. Is we know what we're going to have to replace, and so that money is being put away so that when we need something, it's there and it's not taking out of the general fund. And then just my last question that I forgot to ask, code enforcement. That was something that has increased quite a bit, and that was one of our focuses and directions and part of our strategic plan. But just for the benefit of our residents, could you just kind of overview what the changes are and you know, what's happened in the code enforcement department.
Yeah, absolutely. So code enforcement is in the community development department on page 205. So we're on page 205 of the operating budget. You're going to see, I'm looking for the line items here. On line item 34-100 contractual services, you'll see a new line item there for $130,000. That's for abatements, for nuisance abatements. You may recall when we had our workshop on code enforcement, looking at revamping how we do work here. We're looking to move away from nuisance abatement lawsuits and using abatement warrants to be able to address the most health, life safety, most nuisance properties where we go out and get an abatement warrant and we abate that and lien that cost, but we do have to front that money. So we have actually allocated here $100,000 from a recent settlement of a code enforcement matter. Y'all might remember that recent settlement of a code enforcement matter. That $100,000 in, I think $120,000 ish. 121,000. Not that Councilmember Newton remembers. That came back in. So we've used that as the seed money here. We've recognized that revenue and used that as the seed money here for that abatement fund. So in fact, we've already got a way to pay for that. So you're just seeing the expense side here. That's one. And then we did add a half-time part-time person to be a supervisor. So there is a half-time part-time person that's added here. We need a level of supervision. We haven't had any supervision other than Alma, who also has oversight of planning and building. So we've greatly improved our capability here, and we're going to be doing even more when you're going to see ordinance updates coming to you over the next several months to make our processes even better. So we're really on a good trajectory here. But yeah, that big jump of $100,000 is coming from that abatement fund that we got.
And that's money that will be recovered, but again, we have to budget for it.
We have to pay it up front.
Yes.
Yeah, we have to pay it up front, and we'll get at least, so it'll essentially be like a revolving fund. And again, I want to manage expectations that we can't abate every property. There's not enough money, there's not enough time. It's going to be a judgment call about those most nuisance places where we have a problem, that we will go out and do these nuisance abatements.
And just to reiterate, this is something that we've heard from residents over and over about our processes needing to improve them. And so I think this will be really beneficial for our community, our safety, our health, you know, and making sure that everything's done fairly, you know, for those properties that need some assistance in coming into compliance.
I got a couple of questions. One about what Catherine was talking about, the code enforcement, and we're talking about abatement. Are you talking about all kinds of abatement, or is weed abatement included in that, or does fire handle weed abatement?
Yeah, Councilmember, fire is still handling weed abatement. We're really talking about buildings. So like an open and vacant structure that needs to be boarded up, or a nuisance structure that's falling down. The property owner just will not do it. We'll go to court, get an abatement warrant. It will tear it down and say that costs us $20,000. We'll go to court and lien the property for that $20,000, plus all of our administrative costs. So that's the kind of abatement we would be talking about.
Fire does handle the weed.
Yeah, fire's still doing weed abatement and billing for weed abatement. Correct.
Thank you. Now, one more thing, going back to the water. I know several years ago, we started talking about disposal of this water truck because of the AQMD or whatever the deal, because it run out. But now this $100,000, is that just the truck alone, or does that include a new tank? There you are.
So this is for a new water truck. So that truck is a 1990 diesel. It's been in operation for over 30 years. It is not street legal, and it doesn't meet any AQMD requirements. It also doesn't have air conditioning, so when staff is inside, they cannot use that, especially if it's 100 degrees. It is especially important during summer to keep the dust down up at Ingalls, and also to water the arenas to prep them for events.
But is it, are you replacing the whole unit, or is it going to
The entire unit.
transfer the tank over to the?
No, a while back, I believe the tank was replaced, and it's a 2,500 gallon tank. It was replaced, but it's the vehicle itself. We would get a brand new vehicle with the tank.
Okay, that's all I want to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ticky-tack little things on that, because water truck is a different story. And I understand it's all under vehicle replacement, and it's not really an impact. Forklift, to me, needs to be replaced because it's a safety issue. You don't want a failure if you're picking anything up. I don't have a problem with that on the forklift. Water trucks, you run them into the ground till they blow up. And if our water truck, sorry it doesn't have air conditioning, sorry it doesn't meet AQMD stuff because it's never going to go on the road, the tires are falling off and the springs are coming out of the seat, I don't care. All right? And what you're proposing is a water truck that's got Sirius radio, air conditioning, all the bells and whistles, and it's a support piece of equipment. Okay? Run that truck till it blows up is my feeling on that. It just, they're water trucks. Let it leak. It doesn't hurt anything. And I just, sorry it doesn't have air conditioning. Roll down the windows, wet the arena down, and he'd back on the tractor and sit in the air conditioning that the tractor's going to have.
And I'll agree
Right.
I'll agree with him on that. Usually somebody steals one of them before it quits running anyway.
Yep.
But as far as the seats, you can put a pillow down there where you're going to sit. But as far as putting all the goodies on a new truck, get crank windows that we grew up with, and they can be the air conditioners and stuff like that. But if it's going to just sit there quite a bit, yeah, they will. They don't get driven 500 miles a day like a normal truck. I mean, it may get used a little bit every day because I used to work the arenas up there, and I'd run it early in the morning, and I'd run it again later in the afternoon, and everything. But as far as buying a Rolls Royce type, I don't think we need to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, this 100,000 is just a placeholder. I mean, obviously, if we can get something cheaper, we're not looking for top of the line. We're just looking for something to replace this. This equipment has also been in the shop twice this year. So we have rental costs because we do have to have a water truck for our events. So we have additional rental costs and repair costs for this vehicle. So that's another factor that we are looking into for the replacement of this vehicle.
Oh, I understand that. I was just saying, like Mr. Newton here, about having all the bells and whistles on it. It just needs to start up and throw it in gear and head out, and have a reverse on it.
I have a couple others, if I could. Lori, on page 39, Special Asset Fund, that I'm looking at it right, we're still carrying a balance of $6,400,000. Page 39.
Yes, you're carrying a fund balance. I'm gonna let Lisette speak to this because I believe this carries some notes with it. So about what's available in cash versus what's in fund balance here. So
Yes, so we do, when we did the initial PARS contribution of 1 million,
Mhm.
that came from here. So we were talking, discussing regarding the accounting for it and with our auditors. And so what we had done is moved it from cash to restricted cash in that same fund. So that's why you still see the 6 million in there. So we're working with our auditors to move that restricted out of the special asset fund and put it in the general fund, and only leave the special asset as if the initial 1 million was removed from there.
So with that caveat, it's 6 million with that $1 million sitting there. It really is more like, it's really 5 million, and we're going to adjust this in the final book. So because it seems to me is an odd way to do it.
Yeah.
So we're going to, instead of carrying it here, we'll carry it in restricted fund balance in the general fund side. So you really have 5 million. We'll work on getting you the actual number here. Is it even 1 million, or is it 1
Well,
million?
it's earned interest, so
It's got interest
yeah.
earnings. Okay, so it's not. It's around $1 million plus interest. So it's really around 5 million is your balance.
And that'll park just in the general fund.
Yes,
But
under restricted.
restricted.
Yes,
Okay.
for the PARS trust.
It's just a cleaner way to see it because, again, we could leave it here, but it just looks funky. It looks like it's higher than it really is. So it's better to have it sit in the pars. Unlike, this is probably for our accountant relatives, the OPEB trust sits off books also, but OPEB under the GASB rules, we don't have to account for on our books. It's in that trust fund. But for some reason, the pars trust for pension benefits, we still have to reflect as our asset, even though it's in an irrevocable trust.
And when you say work with the auditors on that, how, what's that process? I mean, other than you want to keep it legal and out of trouble, but
Yeah, no, it's just making sure that when we do our year-end entries, which is coming up next month, is that we're doing it in accordance with the GASB.
okay.
So making sure that it's in the proper restricted account.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, Berwin.
On page 272 under the general fund, bleacher rentals. We don't have a item on that, an amount on that for this year. Is that because it's a wash? Whoever rents the place pays rental on the bleachers?
Councilmember Hannah, I think you're looking at revenues, right? So the revenues for bleacher rentals for 1 year, there was a revenue. I don't know. Amanda, do you want to come speak to that? In general, the team's been working to restructure how they put the buckets of fees for angles. So
Yeah, for bleacher revenues, we have it projected. We haven't really been charging for bleacher rentals. Mostly our big rodeos, it's included in their contract. Like for PRCA, Horse Week, or the fair, we don't charge for bleacher rentals, so we don't have that in there. We actually were talking with someone today about a film permit up at Ingalls, and we were going to charge them for bleacher rentals, but we didn't have a number to really place that at because it's not something common that we charge for
Okay,
currently.
that's included in the rental when you rent the facility.
On a lot of our big contracts, yes. Yeah,
Okay, thank
we'll
you.
try to pick that up.
All right, other questions? All right, so then we're going to go ahead, Madam Clerk, just to make sure, see if we have any public comments again, correct? Okay, so are there any?
This time I have no public comments.
Okay, no public comments. All right, so then we'll go ahead and bring it back to council for discussion and guidance for staff. So, what's the pleasure of the group? Okay.
Like I said in the beginning, revenues are just a tick over expenditures when you look at it in all one bucket, which is a good thing. And touching base on what was really important to me was also, new projects, carryover projects, and burdening staff. It's like, let's be aware of, let's not pile it on. And so we just keep rolling along and just moving forward. But I'm trying to kind of break into needs and wants, and that Councilmember Bash touched on it as far as our employees. We're getting to the point where we're competitive with other cities, which is good, and that we empower our employees and with training and seminars and whatever we can do in that regard. But I just want us to be, maybe checking it back a little bit. It's like moving forward, but just tapping the reins, tapping the brakes a little bit if there's some savings. with that, but not cutting it out. And I think we need to look through that whole, every little item, what do we need to do? And then what is the want with that? But going back to the bigger question I have is back on the Measure R. And like I said, what we talked about, public safety. We're going to have, my feeling is that we're not at the position where we're going to have a cut to public safety. And Measure R should be not used this year. It's something we need to stay aware of, for next year or the year after with sheriff increases, CAL FIRE increases, that some point in time, it has to stay on our radar. But I'm still troubled with the parks and facilities on the rejection of this. And I'm not quite sure how to approach it. It's because I believe some of these costs are Measure R specific. Okay, but you know how we let's say we spread all the costs on different items that we talked about, like how we spread salaries between like water or sewer or this account and that account. Under facilities, we have $210,000 for janitors, janitor service. Instead of coming out of, or being suggested to come out of Measure R, can that be spread amongst departments? I mean, that they're all big items, but that's the largest out of that 400. It's half of the 421,000. Like Public Works probably needs more janitorial attention than your office. Okay, so, but I mean, I don't know if that could be spread, but I just have difficulty like that chunk coming out of Measure R. But I'm almost thinking that we should look at these items, see what can be funded by general fund or by department, and then go back to the Measure R committee and say, I think these are more specific, that do fit the requirements of that tax measure. If you go to parks, 439,000 is park maintenance, and that, I think that portion was one of the intents of Measure R. And like I said, even in the past, it may have come out of general fund, but it wasn't consistent. It's just like we had with the trails. Trail maintenance wasn't consistent till we had Measure R to maintain all the trails. So I don't want the parks to suffer on that, but maybe some of this other can be broken down too. I know it's not very clear, but I'm trying to give you a haphazard direction.
Berwin, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'll agree with Greg on some of this stuff could come out of Measure R. I don't understand why they excluded it, but on all of our departments, are we fully staffed on all of them? Are we short anybody that?
No, we always have a few vacancies, so we do have some vacancies. Yeah.
But your normal, excuse me, your normal salary and everything includes when those vacancies would be filled, or is that or we just what we're paying on the normal, on the short side of it?
Yeah, so the budget assumes all the positions are filled. We budget fully for all of our positions,
Okay,
but we always do have some vacancies.
all right. All right, thank you, that's all I have.
Catherine?
Sure. A couple comments. Just to go back to the water truck. I just want to be cognizant that I don't want us to spend a dime to save a nickel. You know, sometimes there comes a point where you put out more money to try to keep something going than if you would have just taken the initiative and just bought something new. We've all come to that situation, and you know, you think I'm gonna just fix the car and it's gonna last me another 2 years instead of buying a new one, and then the car blows up 2 months later, and you're like, I should have taken that $2,000 and just put it towards the new truck. So definitely we want to use our stuff till it runs to the ground, but we don't want to keep forking out money on something that really we have the money to replace. So whatever we decide on that, you know, just as we move forward in the future. For Measure R, I heard Councilmember Newton say, you know, not about using Measure R for public safety. But with the budget increases, you know, I did sort of the same thing that I heard Mayor Grunmeyer did, was I looked at page 23 and I said, where is it going up? Where is it going down? Where are the big changes? You know, the biggest thing that's going up is public safety, $2.5 million. And so we can talk about pennies, and we can talk about dollars. So I think definitely there's some trimming that can do, but some of the trimming isn't going to make up for that $2.5 million increase that's happening there. You know, we have, so really the biggest things in the budget, right, are that increase in public safety, and then some of our staffing costs, which we have, you know, made some strategic decisions in investing in our staff because we were losing a lot of staff. We want to be able to compete with other cities. We want to have staff here, so when folks are coming to the counter and they need assistance, they can get the assistance that they need, that we can service our residents in the way that they expect to be serviced, and that we can take good care of them. So, you know, when I looked at, I pulled up all the, you know, the Measure R, the ballot measure, and the staff reports, and everything else that everybody, you know, has looked at. And one of the biggest things, right, and Councilmember Bash alluded to this and talked about this, is that, you know, this is going to be a repeating situation. We have 1/3 the rooftops that another city our size around us would have. We just don't have the number of houses putting money into our system. You know, the property tax that a normal city receives, our size is about 21% of their revenues, and ours is only about 6%. So the whole reason that Measure R came into existence was recognizing that there's always going to be this gap. And, you know, when I moved to Norco, we didn't have traffic enforcement. We didn't have any deputies, which is great for not getting traffic tickets, but it's not great for keeping our streets safe. You know, that's one of the biggest complaints that we get. And so Measure R, it's specific in its priorities, restoring and maintaining our facilities, and, you know, not allowing for any cuts to public safety. So certainly we can find ways to trim, but I think even with that, we're still going to have a decision to make in terms of the Measure R piece, and the reserve piece. For that, I would agree that there are definitely some of this maintenance piece. We've been doing maintenance pieces out of Measure R, and so I would support where, you know, there definitely, I would agree that some of these expenditures fall clearly within what we've been doing with Measure R. And everything that was proposed is within its intended purpose. Now, the policy decision of whether it's used for that or not. You know, I heard some people saying some things about backfilling the general fund. And it's a sales tax. It goes straight into the general fund. Now, we made the decision to earmark it or mark it as Measure R, but it's not, I wouldn't say it is backfilling it because it's part of it. The sales tax was passed so that we could have these services and keep up with the things that we have in our town, because before, things just weren't maintained and things were starting to fall apart. We have a lot of amazing facilities and parks for a town our size with the number of residents that we have, and to maintain them so that they're safe, it costs money. You know, our public safety is almost half of our budget, and I haven't heard anybody say that they want any of those cuts. You know, we hear complaints sometimes about, you know, it takes this long to get something done by the city. If we start cutting staff, it's going to take longer. You know, our roads aren't going to get fixed. our traffic. We hear about, if we don't have, we've gone up to 3 traffic enforcement deputies. So none of these are easy decisions. And I just think, if we decided to use some of the reserve, because there is a reserve, it's really hard to save money. It's very easy to spend it. And so I'm cognizant of that. But this is going to be something that I think we're going to come back to, even if we don't use Measure R this year. Certainly, I think that a budget is always an estimate. It is not, this is what's going to happen. No one has a crystal ball. And in the past, there have been times where we were budgeted to have a deficit and it didn't come to fruition because revenues were up a little better. Everything in here is conservative with salaries and so forth. And so those come down a little lower and it ended up being a wash or a little bit ahead. So will this amount that we're projecting to come from reserve or Measure R, will it be that high? It might not be, but I appreciate that we're giving a realistic vision of what could happen, so it's not a surprise. And so we could always use Measure R if that does come to fruition, but perhaps if revenues go up, then that wouldn't be needed. We could use it as a last resort for some of these things. So I really appreciate the residents and the residents who worked so hard on this, because this has really beautified our city. Measure R has made such a difference. Anyone I talk to about this tax, they're like, yes, I can see what it has done for my neighborhood, for our facilities. It's done a huge amount of wonderful things to really make our city a special place. And so I understand that there are some passionate viewpoints on how it should be spent, and maybe some differing opinions based on what the conversations were on working to get it passed. But just really was also looking forward to hearing what my fellow council members had to say.
It was interesting, the speaker, and thank you very much. We talked about the people, and we used that chart, as I said the other night. We made the chart, people first. I don't think there's a single council person up here that doesn't view their job as making sure we keep people safe. We do everything we can to give them services. We want the town to look nice. And I think all 5 of us also understand we're doing the impossible. What we're doing with the town, there's a reason we're the last one standing. Norco's the last one in this area. The other thing that I think that when Greg talks about the lawns got mowed, part of that is because through the years, one of the constants has been our staff. I remember Terry telling me that there were times when they would say, you know what, you're not going to get paid tomorrow. Can you guys just hold out for 3 days? And they still got the work done. Wasn't perfect. Michelle, look at the hours you put in the past. I mean, just staff loved the town and loved what was occurring here. They bought into the lifestyle. And so they made up for a lot of what we see. So for me, as much as I don't like spending the money on classes and all that kind of stuff, and we just gave significant raises to bring people up, it's actually payback. We're paying them back, and we're in return. I can't imagine that our staff isn't going to be much better, but when all is said and done, whether it's Measure R, whether it comes from whatever fund it comes from, it's the people's money. The one thing that unfortunately nobody got is it's like we're still going to take care of every friggin' dollar that we can. Whether we take it out of Measure R, we take it out of the general fund, whatever we do. That said, the next 2-3 years are going to be very difficult. I anticipate with inflation, I think if I don't know who's going to get elected, but there's a hole to be dug out federally, statewide. The state's broke. They're broke. And we're in a very, very good position. Andy left us with good bones, and now what we're trying to do is move to the next level. And I really do believe, I'm going to put words in my colleagues' mouths, we're all looking ahead 5, 10, 15, 25 years ahead, because we'd like our children and our grandchildren to enjoy this lifestyle. And so for me, the whole Measure R turmoil was a nothing burger. I felt bad for Lori, because if you look at the paperwork, the promises, and I heard them myself, I was here, but if you look at the paperwork, she was right where she needed to be. And I also want to say that I've been here when city managers told council what they wanted to hear. I don't want that. I mean, she was very fair. She said, this is my opinion, but here's your option. It's up to you. I want a city manager that is going to give me her best professional opinion. And I think my colleagues will also agree. We worked really hard to find a good candidate to run this city. And so I'm very pleased with what you did. I know some of the people got upset, but I really believe no matter what happens, this council is going to spend the money wisely. And I really believe that our staff, for the people of the city, are going to make sure that money is spent wisely. And I also know something maybe you guys don't know. That woman's tough as nails. She is going to make sure that every penny is spent well. So it was a nothing burger. However, if the council decides they want to take it out of the general fund, if we want to say that now, I'm totally fine with it. I like Greg's suggestion that some of it, I agreed with I agreed with both you, and I agreed with both of you. Wherever it comes from, we just have to make sure we spend it wisely, which we will, and that staff will distribute it and do what they're supposed to do. So whatever you guys want to do, I'm copacetic, and that's all I have to say. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Kevin. And I'm kind of along the same lines as what Greg has said and what Catherine has said as well. Looking at the budget and then going through like the Measure R work that was done. A lot of work was done from the community and from the electeds and everything as well, because Norco isn't sustainable without it, right? And I think all of us up here know that. Looking at the budget, and especially to what Catherine said, having a deficit budget presented to us is not anything new. It's been that way for the last 3 or 4 years. We've had one thing or this thing or that thing that has saved us, whether it was a new development or ARPA funds or whatever. The last few years we've approved a deficit budget, and it's come back positive because of those little things that happen. So with that being said, because of how conservative our budgets typically are, my preference would be to kind of go with what Greg said and take some of these items that we have been paying out of Measure R and some of these things that are explicitly Measure R, take them back to the committee and say, will you reconsider these items? The council's asking for you to reconsider on these handful of things. I can see where potentially there were a few things presented that would have upset members of the committee. And sometimes when we get upset, then we're not going to hear the rest of the presentation or look at every single thing. And so I think that that's a fair ask to have those other things reconsidered. And then, I've heard from residents loud and clear that they're not interested in Measure R being used this year for those items. And so, I'm willing to use reserves and let it play out and see where do the chips fall at mid-year, where do the chips fall at the end of the year. And then if we have a different case to bring back to the residents at the end of the year, then that will speak for itself when we come to mid-year or the end of the year. And then again, everybody, residents and all of us can reevaluate at that time. So that's where I'm at, just on the budget in general. And again, one of our strategic plans is human capital. And so we can see that that's clearly in the budget that's been presented. And so I'm hoping, that we see that staff sees that we're investing in our staff, and then, there's that return on investment on the part of council and the policy decision to follow through with that part of our strategic plan. And then the last part I'll speak to is just the infrastructure and maintenance. I can remember, and I haven't been up here that long, like facilities were literally falling apart. Trails, trails are the most important thing in Norco, and we budgeted $12,000 a year for trails. And so what we were saying and what we were doing didn't match. And I feel like sitting up here now, what we say and what we do are starting to be aligned as a council. And I think that's critically important. And so as I look at the budget, is what we say matching what we're going to do? Where are we putting our money? Where are we making our investments? And do those two things align? And so for me, in general, yes, they align. But again, my preference would be, let's use reserves for right now and see if this is just a little hiccup, or if we get some more of our good old Norco luck and something comes in and we don't have a deficit, at the end of the year. So any other? No, we don't need a motion tonight, correct? Consensus. Okay, Berwin, you had something?
On this stuff here, Greg, we was talking about on the blue. If we sent that back to Measure R, to the Measure R committee, how long would it take them to, would they have time to make a decision before the end of the fiscal year is what I'm trying to get at, or how would that work?
I think what we would do is ask them to hold a meeting. So we would pull them and try to have a meeting with them. I'm sure they'd be willing to organize a meeting. We work around their schedules. So we would look to try to do that before your next time to discuss the budget.
Yeah, before you get it, before it puts you in a bind about getting.
Correct.
the budget. Our next
Yes, sir.
meeting on the budget, what, June the 7th?
I think we're aiming for the 7th as a workshop. Just calendars are terrible this month. So it's going to have to be that morning or the afternoon of the 7th.
Well, do we need to make a motion to send this back to the Measure R committee, Mayor?
I think I heard there was some pieces of this list that you wanted to ask them
Right.
about.
Yeah. Go ahead, Greg.
Name your numbers there. Newton?
Well, I wasn't going to name my numbers. What I was going to do was ask staff to do that. Because outside I can talk water trucks all day. I'm not going to sit and say, should generator service be in or out for Measure R? Should that be general fund or HVA maintenance? Is that a line item that should be included in Measure R, or should it be general fund? I think before we go to take these two items, staff should go through it and go, okay, well, I think my general fund account can absorb that, and maybe it does belong there. But like we talked earlier about janitors, right? But maybe some are just very legitimate. And that's how I kind of want to get staff's presentation to the Measure R committee to go, okay, priority landscape park maintenance, that seems pretty clear that would be one of the tenets of Measure R. And then, as the mayor said, I'm fully aware of the public safety element, and we may need to cross this bridge at mid-year or next year. But with that, if I may, one of my opinions on Measure R and how it was sold was we were, and this is going to lead to a question on the budget, we were below water. Measure R was to get us above water so that we could still breathe, but we still had to build a bridge to dry land. Okay, Measure R is the lifesaver at the time, which then brings me to Division 745, Economic Development. And our budget request this year is $60,000, where in the past it's been just a little shy of twice that. That's the key for us. And could you explain just a little bit on that line item?
Sure. So in the
For
past,
economic development.
yes. So in the past, the city did have a part-time economic development person for a number of years on contract who worked alongside the city manager and did some economic development initiatives. That person retired and we have not refilled that position. So we do not have any dedicated person. What we do have is our contract with Retail Strategies to assist in retail recruitment and information. So that was a great contract the council approved in the fall. So that's what you're seeing in that contract, plus $10,000, I think, for miscellaneous other things that may come up. So would it be helpful to have someone to assist with some of this economic development initiatives? Absolutely. I'm just sensitive to the situation we're in. But in an ideal world, it would be very helpful to have those resources, either on contract or even just like a management analyst of someone who's a go-getter who can help work alongside me and Alma and the council and assist property owners and implement some of the strategies. It might be a good time to revisit that as part of as part of the general plan scope. We've actually proposed an economic development component. I'm not going to call it an element because we're toying with the structure. It might not actually be an element of the general plan, but as part of the general plan update, we're asking the consulting team to develop sort of an economic development strategy light, if you will, scaled to Norco, so not this giant scale to us. Once that's done, that might be a really good time to bring on somebody either on contract or a full-time person, but like a junior level person to assist us. But
If the budget.
I'm just sensitive, and I've shared, I really feel like the organization is going to need to stay about the same size. I think, that's just the reality we're going to have here for a while. So the contract option may be a great option, but just a lot of times that's more expensive. So ironically, it can be more money to have a contract person. So, but could we use some help? Absolutely. Absolutely. When we can afford it, I think that's a smart thing to think about doing.
And just one last, without going back to that, the 60,000, I think you said retail strategies is 50,000.
50,000.
And then the other 10,000,
I
is
think
that
it's
like the different conventions?
I think it's is it ICSC? And let's look at where are we in here?
You'd have to give me a page number.
Do you have
on
a
it.
page number?
Um,
Is it in admin?
But that would be where, like, Councilmember Bash, Councilmember Hoffman would attend along with staff.
I know in the past that has occurred. We went, Councilmember Bash and Councilmember Hoffman and I went to ICSC in San Diego in September. Alma and I are going on the 22nd and 23rd to Las Vegas for ICSC and meeting with retail strategists there.
Not taking Kevin with you?
If you'd like to come, you're more than welcome to come. I
He's
know,
a lot
but
of fun in Vegas.
I will be monitoring that, I'm sure, if you would like to come. No, happy to have you. Absolutely. And the councilors, you have budgets, and I know you're members of ICSC, so you're certainly love to have you along with us. That'd be great. But honestly, a lot of it is about having those meetings, and we've got someone that's been setting up some meetings for us with some success to kind of talk to people.
Okay.
Sure, happy to have you.
I was just looking to get him out of town, that's all. No, okay. I mean, because I think that's such an important component to get us past Measure R. Also, thank you, Mayor.
So I think staff's looking for consensus on the topics that we have discussed. So we'll start with, is there consensus among council to take a few of the proposed items on the memo back to Measure R before the end of the budget?
Yes.
Yes. Berwin, are you good with that? Yeah. Okay. So then the next item of consensus would be where we're going, or what money we would use to present a balanced budget. Is that correct? Is that the other direction that you want? Or? So what's your second staff direction, like where we're going to bring funds from to present a balanced budget, correct?
Right. So Mayor, you had suggested we look at balancing with the use, showing the balance of the use of reserves for now and reevaluating it mid-year.
Correct.
And put the public safety expenditures go back into the general fund. So that'll be a negative. And then whatever other items staff may see, we can kind of figure in there, and those will also come essentially out of reserves for now.
So if
Yeah.
there's consensus among the council to do so, it's not my sole discretion. So
And then a reserve policy, because right now we have 25% of our reserve policy is 25% of the general reserve, or the money, our rainy day fund, right, must be saved for operational expenditures, right? If there was some kind of, economic downturn or what have you, we have by resolution that we cannot touch 25% of our operating budget. So every year it goes up a little bit as costs go up and our operating budget goes up a little bit. But we're going to get a reserve policy back, because right now I think that's one of the things that will help us is it's just kind of in there and it looks like there's all this money. It'll help us kind of define, do we need some money for facilities? If something major happened with the facility, that we had some money in there for emergencies, and would kind of help set up what the money is in buckets for and what is just in there as rainy day unrestricted could be used in this case or other cases. And so that's going to be coming to us soon as well. I think that'll help to give a good picture to us and to the public. What is that money used for? We're not just socking away money and trying to use, Measure R.
Yes, and Lisette's team's working on that. That's a strategic plan item that Andy had proposed. That's coming to you in June at the June 7th meeting, right? June 7th with that proposal. So yes, and to that point, for the sake of the public too, while we have a nice, the council's been very successful at building a reserve, but the reality is we have no infrastructure reserve yet. We still need to build that. We have no economic development reserve. We have to build that. We don't have a working capital reserve, which is typically there to time you between sales tax. So we've done a great job, but as wonderful as it sounds, what we've built up, we have work to do. And to Councilmember Newton's point about economic development, often that takes investment. So that means often buying property, doing public-private partnerships. We need seed money to do those sorts of things to help build that bridge to that next thing. So we do need to I want to see us in a position where we are budgeting contribution to reserve on a regular basis so that we can continue to build that. So the reserve policy will sort of let you decide what those reserve buckets you would like and then set some reserve targets for those buckets. So, and then we'll revisit that every year as a matter of policy. That's really the best practice to do with reserve policies. So looking forward to that.
Thank you.
All right. So does that provide enough direction to staff?
It does. I'd like, if I can restate, so we're going to go through the, so with regard to what the Measure R proposal, we're going to move the public safety costs back into the general fund in the draft budget. And then on the other contract maintenance and for parks and facilities and maintenance, staff is going to go through here, look at what items on here that still we feel like are truly in keeping with Measure R, and have another discussion with the committee, ask them to revisit those, reconsider some of those things in light of the measure and see what their recommendations are at this time with regard to that. And then we're going to, but on some of these other things, we'll look to shift them back into the city's regular budget, and that'll contribute to that deficit number a little bit, but we'll see where we are in that. And then we'll, based on that Measure R committee discussion, then we'll come back on June 7th with a new proposed schedule of how we're balancing, and we'll see where we are with what the committee was recommending. So, okay. And then with regard to the water truck, I have no trouble deleting the water truck. To me, we have other big issues here, and while we certainly need it, and no one has proposed Sirius XM radio, Councilmember Newton, but we do need one day. If the council wants to defer that, that is fine. That is fine, but we do need one. And I would also say too, just one more thing. We do have OSHA mandates and requirements, Cal OSHA requirements for heat exposure. So while air conditioning, I'm sure for folks of us I went to Southern California high school with no air conditioning, right? I know what that was like, but we actually do have a heat illness and injury prevention program, and we have to abide by that. So when it gets too hot, we literally cannot run people in unair conditioned vehicles. It's not permissible. So we do need to, I know, Berwin, but as we replace things, we do need to add air conditioning. It is a safety requirement. And
I say get the water truck. I mean,
it's up to you.
It's an old school thing, Lori, but look at it this way.
Just get
The water truck comes
Right.
with its own misting system in the cab.
There you go.
okay?
Like I said, happy to defer it another year if that's the council's.
Or
preferred.
100 Boy Scouts with buckets, your choice.
It's completely up to you.
Yeah,
Happy to defer.
you know what? I think to Catherine's point, why spend a dime to save a nickel? I think the tires haven't gone flat yet, but I do think it's about ready to collapse. And to your point, I mean, we're all old school, so air conditioning is something we're like, but we live in a new California, so
you can't, I don't think you can get a truck with the roll down windows. They don't sell stick shift anymore. I mean, they just don't. They do, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah. So, I mean, it would be great to get a basic. We'll get the basic, but sometimes the basic now is not the basic that we used to get, unfortunately.
if we don't get it this year, it'll be too expensive next year, and besides that, like Newt said, they can turn a sprinkler on inside there.
Yeah, I don't think, I think we should get the truck. Just, I don't know how everybody else feels, but
Okay, so it sounds like we have consensus on a truck and, you know, in the meantime, Councilmember Newton can drive the old one around when they need to water down up there at the park.
I'll second that motion.
There we go. So problem solved.
Too old to buy that extended warranty.
Oh my goodness. Anything else?
Thank you.
All right. So one last little note. We would like to say happy birthday to the city manager today. Happy birthday. Yeah, there we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this workshop is adjourned.